So, I'm 29, living a pretty stable life, working hard in a job that has me out of town half the month. Despite my hectic schedule, I've been living with my parents and helping them out financially, paying $1,800 a month for rent and groceries, which is a hefty chunk of my income. Now, I don't mind helping my folks. That's what family does, right? But the way they've handled recent events has really shown their true colors. Let's start with how things usually go down in our family. My parents have always had this way of favoring my brother. Maybe it's because he's the only son, or he's got kids, but it's been pretty obvious. Over the years, there have been countless instances where I felt sidelined, but I shrugged it off because family. A while back, when I first landed my job and started making decent money, my parents hinted that they needed help with their mortgage. I stepped up without a second thought, agreeing to pay rent. It wasn't a formal thing, more like a verbal agreement where I thought I was doing my part. Little did I know, this set the precedent for them expecting me to financially support them indefinitely. Fast forward to a few years later, my brother, who's always been a bit reckless with his finances, got married and had kids. Despite his own needs, he rarely contributed to our parents' household, even less so after his kids were born. He had a good job, but his money was his, you know? Here's where it gets juicy. My brother loses his job. Tough break, right? Naturally, he turns to my parents for help, and without batting an eye, they decide he should move back into the family home. Only problem? The space he needs for his family is currently my space, the basement suite. I remember coming home one evening, and my parents sat me down for a talk. Here's how that went down. Mom, honey, you know your brother's situation. He's got the kids, and things are tight since he lost his job. Dad, we think it's best if he moves back here for a while, just until he's back on his feet. Me, okay, that makes sense. Family helps family, but where's he going to stay? Mom, well, we were thinking the basement suite would be perfect for them. It's got the space, and it's separate from the main house so they can have some privacy. Me, and where am I supposed to go? Dad, we've set up the hobby room for you. It's cozy. Me, you mean the tiny room filled with Mom's sewing and craft stuff? Mom, it's only temporary. Besides, it's our house, and we need to make decisions that benefit the family as a whole. I was stunned. They were asking me to squeeze into a glorified closet so my brother could have my entire suite. It felt so unfair. I didn't argue much after that. I knew it wouldn't change their minds. Instead, I packed up my essentials, clothes and laptop, and figured out a new plan. I booked an all-inclusive resort for my week off, cheaper than paying rent and groceries at home. When I told my parents, they seemed fine at first. Then came the demands for rent and groceries money, as if I hadn't moved out. That led to another heated conversation. Mom, where's the money for rent and groceries? We're counting on that to help support your brother. Me, I moved out. Why would I pay for a place I don't live in anymore? Dad, you can't just leave your family hanging. We're in a bind here. Me, but you gave my living space away. You can't expect me to pay for that. Then my brother chimed in over the phone. Brother, you're being selfish. I have a family to support. We need that space more than you do. Me, and when you were working, did you send money to Mom and Dad? No, you needed your money. Now I need mine. He tried to bargain, offering to move upstairs if I came back, but by then, I'd crunched the numbers. Staying at an all-inclusive during my off weeks was not only cheaper, but also stress-free compared to living with the constant demands at home. Despite everything, I sent my parents $500 for groceries out of guilt and a sense of duty. But that didn't stop the barrage of criticism from them and other relatives, calling me an idiot for abandoning the family in a time of need. It's been hard, but moving out has given me perspective on how much I've been enabling their dependency on me. The accusations of being selfish, especially when I've been anything but, really made it clear that my brother and my parents have been taking advantage of my willingness to help. So am I the idiot for moving out after being basically evicted from my space? I don't think so. I think it's about time I put my own needs and financial stability first. After all, if I'm not living there and not eating there, why should I continue to pay as if I am? Now for the top comments before the update. Not the idiot. Your parents made you pay $1,800 for a room in Edmonton, and you were only there for 2 weeks. Your family is taking advantage of you. You also gave them $500, so don't feel bad for leaving. And don't look back. Lord, tell me you're the scapegoat without telling me you're the scapegoat. There was no communication, no family meeting, no decision together. They decided unilaterally to evict you from the space you were living in to support your brother without any conversation and expected you to take it. I think there is nothing wrong with helping your parents, so I wouldn't necessarily say your old rent was a problem, but it's crazy that they would kick you out and expect the rent and grocery money to remain unchanged. Honestly, It's healthier for you to be on your own anyway. $1,800 for 2 weeks is overcharging for a basement suite. Opie's parents overcharged her rent. Then they kicked her to a small room to accommodate their son and expected her to grin and bear it. I'm pretty sure they've never heard the term, "don't bite the hand that feeds you." In this case, they marked the hand that fed them. Yep, exactly. That's what the family wanted. Free is $1,800 and the ability to boss and serve OP wherever they want it. Don't forget about the babysitting. Her parents raised her and her brother. Sister-in-law is exhausted and needs help on demand. OP. You didn't agree to subsidize your entire family on your salary while you stayed in a tiny hobby room and babysitting siblings' food too. That's just extra ridiculous. Good for you. I'm moving out and getting way better. All-inclusive, warmer accommodation, with a few margaritas thrown in. Update 1. After my somewhat dramatic exit from the family home, where I traded my basement suite for the unpredictability of various resorts during my off weeks from work, I was ready to embrace a little peace. However, peace seems to be a luxury that's not on the menu for me right now. It all started with a phone call from my dad. I was half expecting it to be an olive branch, maybe a little acknowledgement that they'd pushed too hard, or an admission that they missed having me around. But nope, it wasn't anything close to that. Instead, it was more like a summons back to the family fold, but this time with added financial responsibilities. Dad was on the other end, sounding more stressed than usual. "Dad, listen, we need to discuss your brother's situation further. It's worse than we thought." Me. "Dad, I'm already sending money for groceries. I'm helping from a distance as best I can." Dad. "That's not going to cut it anymore. He's in a real bind, and now there are school fees for the kids that need covering." That caught me off guard. I mean, school fees? Since when did my responsibility extend to covering my nephew's education expenses? Me. "Why am I expected to contribute to that? Shouldn't that be on him and what he can manage?" Dad. "It's about supporting family. That's how it should be." Before I could argue further, he threw in another guilt-inducing comment, suggesting that if I didn't step up, the kids might have to leave their school due to financial constraints. It felt like emotional blackmail, but that wasn't all. My mom got on the line too, and she had news of her own. Apparently, she'd been talking to various relatives, stirring up a storm of concern about my so-called abandonment of family duties. Now there was a family meeting on the horizon, a virtual one, where I was expected to be grilled over my financial contributions, or lack thereof. "Mom, we're all meeting to talk about this. You need to be there. It's important." Like I needed another meeting in my life where I would be painted as the villain for choosing financial independence over endless support. The call ended with them making it clear they were unhappy with my decisions, and I was left fuming yet conflicted. Do I continue to pull away and focus on my own financial health, or do I give in to their demands to keep the peace? In the midst of all this, my brother, who hadn't directly spoken to me since he moved into my old space, decided it was a good time to reach out, not to mend fences, but to join in on the pressure. "Brother, think about the kids. You don't want to be the one they blame for having to switch schools. Don't be selfish." His words hit a nerve, not because they made me feel guilty, but because of the sheer audacity. This was the same guy who'd managed his finances so poorly that he was now relying on our parents, and by extension me, to bail him out. His hypocrisy was glaring. I didn't reply to his message. Instead, I spent the next few days mulling over everything. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how unfair the entire situation was. I was being asked to sacrifice my financial well-being to support not only my parents, but now an extended family network that seemed to have endless expectations. The family meeting loomed large, and when the day came, I logged in with a heavy heart but a clear head. The array of faces on my screen was like a panel of judges, ready to decree my fate. The conversation went as expected. "Aunt, we're all worried about you distancing yourself from your responsibilities." "Uncle, family should come first above all. You need to think about what's more important here." The accusations and guilt trips were thrown around liberally, and I found myself defending my choices more vigorously than I ever had. I laid out my financial plans, the need to secure my future, and the unfairness of being the sole financial buffer for everyone else's shortcomings. It was draining, emotionally and mentally, to have to justify my life choices to a group of people who seemed only interested in what I could give, not in my well-being. By the end of the meeting, I was exhausted, but something in me had shifted. The clarity that came from speaking my truth was liberating. I realized that while family is important, the toxicity of this dynamic was not something I had to accept passively. I decided then and there to set boundaries. I communicated clearly that while I would always love them, I could no longer be their financial crutch. I would help when I could, but not at the expense of my own financial security. The backlash was immediate. More calls, more messages, more guilt. But I held firm. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. So here I am, sharing this with you all, not just as a vent, but as a reminder. Sometimes standing up for yourself is the toughest thing you can do, especially when it comes to family. But it's also the most crucial for your own sanity and stability. Thanks for listening. Any advice or thoughts are more than welcome. How do you handle family expectations without losing yourself in the process? Because right now, that's the balance I'm trying to strike. Update 2. Hey everyone, back again with another hefty dose of my ongoing family drama. Seriously, just when I thought I'd established some ground rules that might actually stick, the situation managed to escalate even further. It's like setting boundaries was the cue for everyone to double down on their efforts to pull me back in. It's exhausting, to say the least. So, after that super intense family meeting where I stood my ground about not being an ATM for everyone's financial crises, I really hoped things might cool off a bit. But boy was I wrong. If anything, it seems my attempts to establish some limits only stirred the pot even more. A few days after the meeting, I got an email. Not from my parents or my brother, but from an aunt who's always fancied herself as the family's moral compass. The email was a doozy, longer than your average rant, packed with accusations and guilt-tripping. Email from Aunt. We need to address a serious issue concerning your recent decisions. It has become apparent that you are withdrawing from your family responsibilities. This behavior is not only disappointing, but deeply troubling to all of us who care about the family's well-being. Your parents have done so much for you, and now when they need your support, you are choosing to prioritize your financial independence over their needs and those of your brother's family. This is a crucial time for your brother, and he needs all the support we can give him. We expect you to reconsider your stance and start contributing more significantly to his mortgage and the children's extracurricular activities. Remember, family is everything. We must support each other, especially during hard times. Reading that email felt like I was being lectured by someone who had no idea, or didn't care, about the pressures I was already under. The level of entitlement was staggering, but that wasn't the end of it. Just when I thought it couldn't get more invasive, my mom decided to take things up a notch by calling my employer. Yes, you read that correctly. She actually called my place of work. Fortunately, she didn't get through to my boss directly, but the message she left with his secretary was enough to raise a lot of eyebrows. Mom's message to my boss. Hello, this is Mom's name. My name's Mother. I'm calling to discuss some urgent family matters that might affect her performance at work. We're going through a tough time, and it's crucial she supports us more. It would be helpful if you could encourage her to take her responsibilities seriously. Thank you. When I heard about this, I was beyond mortified. The idea that she would drag my professional life into this mess was something I hadn't even considered as a possibility. Driven by frustration and more than a little anger, I called her to confront her about the inappropriate call. Me. Mom, why would you call my work? That's completely inappropriate and out of line. Mom, I'm just trying to do what's best for our family. You're not listening, and maybe you'll listen to them. Me. My work has nothing to do with our family issues. You need to respect my professional boundaries. Mom, we're your family. We come first, and you need to prioritize us over everything else. The call ended with no resolution, just more tension and frustration. It seemed like every attempt I made to establish some reasonable boundaries was met with more extreme tactics from their side. And as if that wasn't enough, my brother has now begun a campaign of his own. He's been sending me texts and emails not directly asking for money but sharing links to expensive items for his kids, like it's some sort of hint. Brother's text. Hey, check this out. Would be great for the kids' summer camp. They'd love it. Link to a pricey summer camp. Saw this and thought of nephew's name? He's been wanting this for ages. Link to a high-end gadget. It's like a constant drip feed of guilt and manipulation, trying to wear me down. In the midst of this, another relative decided to throw their hat in the ring. My cousin, whom I haven't spoken to in months, called me up, trying to play mediator, or so it seemed at first. Cousin. Hey, I know things are tough right now, but you know how your mom and dad are. Maybe you could just help a little more, just until your brother finds his feet? It was yet another plea masked as a friendly suggestion, yet another attempt to make me bend after I'd already stated my limits. The pressure is mounting, and it's getting harder to see a way out that doesn't end in either caving to their demands or severing ties more dramatically. So, here I am, stuck between a rock and a hard place. My family keeps pushing, and I keep backing up until I feel like I'm about to fall off a cliff. It's a delicate balance, trying to maintain my financial independence and sanity while being bombarded by their ever-increasing demands. Thanks for listening to my vent. Any advice on how to handle this new level of intrusion would be greatly appreciated. How do you deal with family that refuses to accept boundaries? Because I'm all out of ideas here. Update 3. After my last update, I had a sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, I had managed to communicate my stance clearly enough that my family would take a step back and respect my boundaries. Unfortunately, that hope was short-lived, and the reality has been anything but accommodating. Let's start with the latest developments. My parents have taken their expectations to a whole new level. It's no longer just about emotional appeals or subtle guilt trips. Now it's full-on demands and a laundry list of financial expectations that they seem to pull out of thin air. Recently, I received an email from my mom that felt more like a corporate invoice than a message from a family member. She meticulously outlined a monthly amount they expect me to contribute, which goes way beyond the basics of groceries or occasional help. Email from Mom. After much consideration, we've come to the conclusion that a contribution of $2,000 a month from you is reasonable to cover your share of the family expenses. This includes your brother's mortgage, the kids' schooling, medical bills for your father's recent health issues, and urgent renovations like the roof repair before winter. Additionally, we have calculated back payments we believe you owe for the times you were under-contributing. The level of entitlement in that email was staggering. Not only am I expected to shoulder these arbitrary costs, but there's also a casual mention of back payments they've concocted based on their own assessment of what I owe them. And as if the financial demands weren't enough, my dad has started a sort of smear campaign among the wider family. He's been calling up relatives, painting me as the family black sheep who has shirked his familial duties. This has resulted in a barrage of calls and messages from cousins, uncles, and aunts I haven't heard from in ages, each echoing the same sentiments about family duty and loyalty. One of my uncles even left a voicemail that could have been scripted for maximum guilt induction. Uncle's voicemail. Hey, it's Uncle Name. Just got off the phone with your dad, and it's really a shame to hear what's going on. Family should stick together, especially in tough times. We didn't raise you to turn your back on family. Think about what you're doing. Meanwhile, my brother has found a new platform for his side of the story, social media. He's been posting about his financial struggles in a way that's designed to tug at the heartstrings of anyone who doesn't know the full story. Each post is a thinly veiled jab at me, portraying him as the martyr struggling to keep his head above water while I supposedly live it up away from family responsibilities. Brother's social media post. In tough times, you find out who your real family is. Struggling to keep everything afloat here, and it's tough when not everyone remembers their roots. Some people forget who was there for them when times were hard. Adding to this, there was a recent family gathering that I wisely chose to skip. According to a cousin who stayed more neutral, my absence and decision to set financial boundaries were the main topics of conversation. It seems my actions have stirred up quite the controversy, transforming me into the family pariah in absentia. Cousin's insight. You wouldn't believe the talks at dinner. You're basically the main character in a drama none of us signed up for. I tried to say you were just setting some boundaries, but it's like I was speaking a different language. They're convinced you're just being selfish. With each passing day, the pressure mounts, becoming more relentless. It feels like every attempt I make to pull back is met with an even stronger push to drag me back in. The more I try to establish my independence, the more they seem determined to erode it, wrapping up their financial demands in the guise of family obligation and loyalty. It's a tug of war where the stakes are my financial stability and mental peace. Every conversation feels like a battlefield, every phone call a strategy session on their part to wear me down and guilt me into compliance. So here I am, wondering how much is too much. At what point does one draw the line definitively and say enough is enough? How do you sever ties that are bound by blood but strained by unrelenting demands and manipulation? This update is more than just a vent. It's a call for advice, for shared experiences, for any wisdom on how to navigate this minefield of familial obligation and personal sanity. How do you handle a family that not only refuses to accept boundaries, but actively seeks to cross them at every turn? Thanks for sticking with me through this ongoing saga. Your insights and support mean the world to me as I try to find my footing in this rocky familial landscape. How do you maintain your independence when your family sees it as a betrayal? That's the million-dollar question I'm grappling with right now. Update 4. Hello again, everyone. Here I am, back with another update that feels more like the latest installment in an ongoing drama series, where the storylines just get thicker and the family antics more intense. Each time I think maybe this chapter will close, a new, even more demanding one begins. Strap in, this one's a doozy. Since the last time I shared, the situation hasn't just escalated, it's transformed into an almost daily struggle with a barrage of tactics that seem pulled straight from a playbook designed to break my resolve. Let's start with the latest strategy: unannounced visits. My parents have now taken to showing up at my doorstep without warning. The first time it happened, I was genuinely taken aback. There I was, thinking maybe they'd come to their senses and we could have a calm discussion, perhaps mend some fences. But no, they had other plans. They came armed, not just with physical folders of bills and documents, but with a prepared list of demands and accusations, all designed to guilt me into opening my wallet and abandoning my hard-earned boundaries. Dad's words: "Look at all these expenses, your brother's struggling, us struggling, and here you are, living like none of that matters. We raised you better than this. It's time for you to stop thinking only about yourself and start contributing like you owe it to this family." The audacity of that confrontation left me more than just a little shaken. It was a wake-up call to how far they were willing to go. I managed to stay calm, but firmly told them they needed to leave if all they wanted to talk about was money. But that wasn't the end of it. My parents, not ones to give up easily, began a new campaign, this time involving my friends and acquaintances. They started reaching out under the pretense of being concerned about me, subtly implying to anyone they could reach that my recent distancing from family duties was due to some kind of personal crisis or breakdown. One of my close friends shared their encounter with me. Friend's account: "Hey, just so you know, I got a call from your mom. She was talking about how you've been avoiding family responsibilities and hinted that maybe you were struggling with something deeper. She asked if I'd noticed any worrying changes in you." This maneuver was not just manipulative, it was invasive and embarrassing. To think that my own family would go so far as to paint me as unstable just to rope me back into the fold was something I hadn't anticipated. And then there's my brother, who until recently had been somewhat quieter compared to my parents. He changed tactics, opting for a more direct and aggressive approach. He began sending me messages that were harsher and more guilt-inducing than before, blaming me outright for the hardships he was facing. Brother's latest message: "Everyone's struggling and you're out there living it up. How do you think that makes us feel? The kids keep asking about you. They don't understand why their aunt has just cut them off. You're ruining everything with your selfishness." Each message from him was like a strike, designed to hit emotional nerves and guilt me into submission. It's clear now that they're all in on this together, each playing their part in a coordinated effort to wear me down. So, here I am, caught in an almost daily battle to maintain some semblance of independence and sanity. The pressure is relentless. Every unreturned call feels like a victory, and every answered one a setback. My personal life, my professional life, it's all starting to feel like it's under siege. Amidst this chaos, I've had to start setting even firmer boundaries, not just with my family, but within my own life to protect my mental health. I've begun screening calls more rigorously, limiting my availability, and in some cases, having very frank conversations with friends and colleagues to preempt any misinformation coming from my family. This constant defense mode is exhausting. It's like being on high alert all the time, and it's not how I want to live. But the alternative, giving in to their demands, would cost me not just financially, but emotionally and ethically. I'm sharing this update not just as a vent, but as a plea for advice and solidarity. For those of you who've navigated similar treacherous family dynamics, how did you manage? How do you maintain boundaries without severing ties completely? Or is cutting ties the only way to regain peace? Thanks for sticking with me through this saga. Your insights, advice, and shared experiences are invaluable as I navigate this incredibly tricky path. How do you keep standing your ground when every day feels like a new battle? Because right now, that's the challenge I'm facing. Last update. Hello everyone, it's me again. This might be my last update for quite some time, if not the final one. As many of you know, the relentless family drama I've been chronicling here has reached a pivotal moment. A moment where tough decisions had to be made for the sake of my sanity and well-being. After much thought, and an overwhelming tide of events, I've made the difficult choice to cut ties with my family and move to another state for a fresh start. Here's how things unfolded, and what it's been like navigating this massive change. Since my last post, the pressure from my family didn't just continue, it intensified beyond anything I had previously experienced. It became clear that no amount of rational discussion, boundary setting, or pleas for understanding would change their behavior. Their demands grew increasingly outrageous, and their tactics more desperate. First, the financial demands turned into outright accusations of neglect and abandonment. My parents, once content with passive-aggressive requests for money, began a concerted effort to paint me as the villain in a narrative they broadcasted not just to close family, but to anyone within our community who would listen. Parents' words. We just don't understand why she's acting this way. After everything we've done for her, she's now turning his back on us when we need her the most. It's heartbreaking to see him change like this, to refuse to help his own family. The emotional toll of being portrayed as the family outcast was immense. I began receiving messages and calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, each echoing the sentiments my parents had shared. The weight of their words was intended to bring me back into line, to make me cave under the pressure and return to my old role as the family provider. And then there was my brother, who took to social media and family gatherings to share tales of how I had abandoned them, how I had let down my nieces and nephews who couldn't understand why their aunt would suddenly disappear from their lives. Brother's narrative. Can you believe it? He just left us all struggling here while he lives it up out of state. The kids keep asking for him, and I don't know what to tell them anymore. His words, whether shared in person or posted online, added another layer of complexity, making it not just a private family issue, but a public spectacle. Amidst this storm, my parents began showing up at my workplace, pleading with my colleagues and causing scenes that not only embarrassed me, but also jeopardized my professional reputation. Each visit was more dramatic than the last, filled with tears and tales of woe intended to paint me as the heartless daughter who'd gone astray. Please, you have to understand, we wouldn't do this if it weren't absolutely necessary. We just want our daughter back, the way he used to be, helping his family. Facing this level of public and private pressure, I realized that the boundaries I was trying to set were not just being ignored. They were being actively challenged in every way possible. It became painfully clear that the only way to preserve my mental health and regain control over my life was to make a radical change. So I decided to move. I packed up my life, accepted a job offer in another state, and left behind the world I knew. This decision wasn't made lightly. It came with a heavy heart and a lot of soul-searching. I knew that moving away and cutting ties would alter my relationship with my family forever. The move itself was both liberating and incredibly challenging. Starting over in a new place meant not just setting up a new home, but also building a new support network from scratch. It meant learning to live without the constant family drama, but also dealing with the guilt and emotional fallout that came with such a definitive separation. Since relocating, my days have been a mix of relief and reflection. There's a peace that comes with no longer being on high alert for the next family crisis, but there's also a sadness in knowing that my ties to my family are severed, perhaps irreparably. Every day brings new challenges and opportunities. I'm exploring my new city, meeting new people, and discovering parts of myself that were buried under years of familial obligations and guilt. I'm learning that while I can cherish the good memories of my family, I can also acknowledge and move away from the toxic patterns that dominated our interactions. This decision to move and cut ties hasn't solved all my problems, but it has given me a space to breathe, to plan for a future that I dictate based on my needs and aspirations, not my family's demands. It's a chance to redefine what family means to me and how I engage with those I love. I wanted to share this final update as a thank you to everyone who's followed along, offered advice, and shared their own stories. Your support has been a beacon during some of my darkest days. For anyone else going through similar struggles, know that sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that lead to the greatest growth. Take care of yourselves, and remember, it's okay to choose your own well-being over familial obligations that seek to diminish you. Here's to new beginnings, to healing, and to finding peace wherever you may be. Thank you, and perhaps someday I'll return with new stories and insights from this journey of self-discovery. Mean step sis. Made sure I'm not her family, but now wants me to give up my home for her and her kids. So, let me just start this off by saying, this is kind of a long story, but I need to get it off my chest. I'm Lexi, 25, and I've got a stepsister, Brianna, who's 26. We've also got two younger half-siblings. But this is really about me and Brianna. Well, mostly about how she's been a total nightmare since the moment our parents got married. I was 7 when my mom married her dad, and I guess I was supposed to be happy about gaining a new family and all that. But from the very first day, Brianna made it crystal clear she didn't want me around. Like, I honestly don't even know why. She just hated me right off the bat. I tried to be nice, like any 7-year-old would, right? I thought maybe we could be friends, hang out, maybe play together or whatever kids do. But nope. She wasn't having any of it. She would just look at me like I was trash or something. You know that look where someone doesn't even want to acknowledge you exist? Yeah, that was Brianna. It didn't matter what I did, she would always make sure I knew she didn't want me around. At first, I thought maybe it was because I was the new kid in the family or something. Maybe she was mad about our parents getting married. But as time went on, it became clear that it wasn't just that. She just genuinely didn't like me. At school, it was even worse. We went to the same elementary school, and she made sure everyone knew we weren't real sisters. She would say things like, "Oh, she's just my stepsister," or "We're not actually related," whenever someone brought it up. And she didn't stop there. She'd go out of her way to embarrass me in front of other kids. I remember one time during recess, she told the other kids that I wasn't part of her family and that her dad only married my mom because she needed somewhere to live. I was 7. How are you going to be that cruel to a kid who's just trying to figure out how families work? Her dad, my stepdad, saw what was going on and tried to step in a few times. He'd tell her to knock it off, that we're all family now, and she needed to treat me better. For a while, I think it kind of worked. Like, she stopped being as mean in front of him. But the second he wasn't around, she'd go right back to being a complete jerk. It's like she took pleasure in making me feel like I didn't belong. And honestly, as a little kid, I didn't know how to handle that. I was already trying to adjust to this whole new family situation, and having someone actively reject me made it so much harder. I'd go home after school crying some days, telling my mom about how Brianna was treating me, and she'd always say the same thing. "She'll come around, just give her time." Spoiler alert, she never came around. Brianna even started trying to get our younger half-siblings involved. Like, she'd tell them I wasn't their real sister, and that they shouldn't listen to me or hang out with me. This was when they were little, so they didn't really understand what was going on. But still, the fact that she would even try to pull them into her little hate campaign against me, that's messed up, right? She was always trying to find new ways to get under my skin. Now, I'm not going to say my whole childhood was horrible because of Brianna. I had good times too, especially with my mom and stepdad. They did their best to make me feel included, and they were supportive whenever I talked about how Brianna was treating me. But there was always that cloud hanging over me, knowing that the one person who should have been my closest ally in all this, my stepsister, wanted nothing to do with me. And when she did want something to do with me, it was just to make me miserable. I think the worst part was when she started spreading rumors about me at school. There was this one time in middle school when Brianna told a bunch of kids that I had stolen something from her, which I hadn't. But kids being kids, they believed her. And suddenly, I was the thief at school. It was humiliating, and she knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't just being mean, she was actively trying to ruin my life. Eventually, it got to the point where my stepdad had to step in big time. Brianna's attitude was so bad that she stopped coming over to our house for a while. He told her straight up that if she couldn't at least pretend to be civil, then she shouldn't bother coming around at all. I don't know if that was the right move, but honestly, it was kind of a relief. At least I didn't have to deal with her constantly being in my face, making me feel like crap. She eventually moved in with her mom full-time when she was around 13 or so. I thought maybe that would be the end of it, like maybe the distance would give her some perspective or something. But nope, it didn't. We still saw each other sometimes. Holidays, birthdays, that sort of thing. And every single time, she made it clear that nothing had changed. She was still just as cruel, just as dismissive, and just as determined to make me feel like an outsider in my own family. By the time we were teenagers, I had pretty much given up on trying to have any sort of relationship with her. I mean, what was the point? I'd spent years trying to be nice, trying to reach out, and she had never once made any effort to meet me halfway. So I just stopped caring. If she wanted to pretend I didn't exist, then fine. I wasn't going to waste any more energy on her. I remember the last time we had any kind of interaction that wasn't straight up hostile. We were 16, and she had just had her first kid. Yeah, she got pregnant at 16 and moved back in with us for a while. You'd think maybe motherhood would change her, soften her or something, right? Nah, she was the same Brianna. If anything, she got worse. She wouldn't let me anywhere near her baby. She told me to never touch her kid, never talk to them, never even look at them. Like I was some kind of monster she needed to protect her child from. It was at that point that I knew for sure. There was never going to be any kind of sisterly bond between us. She made sure of that. And honestly, I was done trying. I had my own life to focus on, and if she wanted to be a bitter, hateful person, that was her choice. But I wasn't going to let her drag me down with her anymore. So yeah, that's where it all started. It's been years since we last saw each other, and honestly, I thought I was done with her. But as it turns out, she wasn't done with me. Alright, so where I left off, I hadn't seen or talked to Brianna in years, and I was honestly cool with that. My life was moving along fine without her drama, and I was doing my own thing. But then, a couple of months ago, I get this phone call from my mom. Now, my mom isn't one to call me for no reason, so I immediately knew something was up. I pick up the phone and she's like, "Hey Lexi, there's something we need to talk about." Right away, I'm thinking, great, what now? My mom has this way of sugarcoating stuff. so I already knew whatever she was about to say was probably bad news. So she starts off all casual, telling me about how Brianna has had a really hard time lately. Apparently, she lost her job a few months ago, and then not long after that, she lost her house. Now she's living with my mom and stepdad along with her 4 kids, and things are, in her words, a bit tense. At this point, I'm still just listening, but I'm not exactly feeling sorry for Brianna. I mean, after everything she's done, how can I? But then, my mom drops the bomb. Brianna's been asking if she and the kids can stay with you for a while. I swear I almost dropped my phone. Like what? Stay with me? The same person who couldn't stand me for years now wants to move into my house with 4 kids? I didn't even know how to respond at first. I just kind of sat there in silence for a minute, trying to process it all. My mom took that as her chance to keep talking, telling me about how cramped their house is and how it would be really helpful if I could take Brianna in for a little bit, just until she gets back on her feet. Now here's the thing. I've worked hard to get where I am. I've got my own place, a job I'm proud of, and a life that's finally drama-free. The last thing I want is to throw Brianna and her chaos into the mix. Plus, 4 kids? That's not a little bit of help. That's a whole new life I didn't sign up for. So I just said, Mom, I don't think that's a good idea. Of course, she tried to talk me into it. Lexi, she's your sister. She's family. Don't you think you should help her out? But honestly, family or not, there's a limit to what I'm willing to deal with. And Brianna passed that limit a long time ago. I told my mom, look, I get that she's in a tough spot, but she's never treated me like family. She made her bed, and now she has to lie in it. My mom didn't exactly like hearing that, but I wasn't about to let her guilt me into something I knew I'd regret. And that's when things really took a turn. The very next day, Brianna called me herself. Now, mind you, I hadn't heard her voice in years, so when I saw her name pop up on my phone, my heart started racing a little bit. I wasn't even sure if I should answer it, but I figured it was better to get it over with. So I picked up, and before I could even say hello, she jumped straight into it. Lexi, I need your help, she said, not even bothering with pleasantries. She sounded desperate, which I guess made sense given the situation, but it still caught me off guard. I mean, this is someone who spent her whole life acting like I didn't exist, and now she's asking me for help like we're suddenly best friends? She went on to explain that she and her kids were crammed into a tiny room at my parents' house, and that it wasn't working out. There was no space, her kids were constantly fighting, and she was at her wit's end. I listened, but all I could think about was how she'd treated me like garbage for years, and now she expected me to swoop in and save her. Then she hit me with the wildest part. She didn't just want to stay with me. She wanted me to move out of my house and move back in with our parents so she and her kids could take over my place. I swear I almost laughed out loud when she said it. Like, is she for real? She basically told me that she needed my house more than I did, and I could help the family by making the sacrifice. I was stunned. I couldn't even form words for a second. When I finally did respond, all I could manage was, wait, you want me to move out of my house for you? I was hoping I misunderstood or something, but nope, she doubled down. Yes, she said, like it was the most normal request in the world. You can go live with Mom and Dad for a while. They have plenty of space. It's just until I get back on my feet. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This woman, who had made my life a living hell, was now trying to kick me out of my own home. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool, and said, Brianna, that's not going to happen. I'm not giving up my house. I worked hard for it, and I'm not about to hand it over to you. That's when she lost it. She started yelling, calling me selfish, saying I didn't care about family, that I was leaving her out to dry. She even threw in the fact that I don't have kids, like that somehow made me less deserving of my own home. She was full-on guilt-tripping me, trying to make me feel bad for not helping her out. But here's the thing, I wasn't going to fall for it. Not this time. I'd spent years trying to make peace with her, trying to be the bigger person, and where did it get me? Nowhere. So I just calmly said, Brianna, I'm sorry you're in this situation, but it's not my responsibility to fix it. You've never wanted anything to do with me, and now all of a sudden I'm supposed to uproot my life for you? No. That didn't go over well. She started screaming even louder, telling me I was a horrible person, that I was turning my back on my own family. It was honestly pretty shocking how fast she turned from desperate to angry. I didn't know what else to say, so I just hung up the phone. After that, I didn't hear from her for a while. I figured she had gotten the message, but I was wrong. A few days later, my mom called again, and this time she was really upset. Apparently, Brianna had been complaining to her nonstop about how I was being selfish and unwilling to help. My mom, bless her heart, was still trying to play peacemaker, saying, Can't you just let her stay for a little while? She really needs help, Lexi. But I wasn't budging. I told my mom the same thing I told Brianna. I'm not giving up my house, and I'm not letting her walk all over me. I've had enough of her crap. My mom wasn't happy, but I could tell she was starting to get where I was coming from. Brianna's entitlement was off the charts, and even my mom couldn't deny that. Still, she was stuck in the middle, trying to keep the peace between her two daughters. But I wasn't about to let Brianna use that to manipulate me anymore. Update 1. Alright, so after the whole phone call mess with Brianna, I was feeling pretty good about standing my ground. I figured she'd either find another solution or keep complaining to our parents until they got sick of her. Either way, it was out of my hands, and I could finally get back to living my life. Or so I thought. A couple of weeks later, I was sitting at home on a Saturday, just minding my own business, when there's a knock at my door. Now, I don't really get many visitors, so I was a little confused. I wasn't expecting anyone, and honestly, I kind of hoped it was just some delivery guy with a package or something. But when I opened the door, guess who was standing there? Yep, Brianna. She was standing on my doorstep with all 4 of her kids and a bunch of suitcases. My stomach dropped. Like, seriously? I just stood there for a second, not even knowing what to say. She looked at me with this dead serious expression and said, "Lexi, we need to talk." I felt my face get hot. I wasn't mad at first. I was more shocked than anything. "What are you doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my cool. Her kids were all standing there, looking tired and kind of confused, and I felt bad for them. But I couldn't believe she actually showed up like this. Brianna sighed like she was annoyed with me, which made no sense. "Look, Lexi, I've got nowhere else to go. It's too cramped at Mom and Dad's, and they're getting frustrated with me. I thought you'd have a little more empathy, considering we're family." I could feel my jaw tighten. Empathy. After everything she put me through, she wanted to play the family card now? I was still trying to wrap my head around the fact that she was standing on my porch, clearly expecting me to just let her and her kids move in. I wasn't having it. "Brianna," I said, trying my best not to lose my temper, "I already told you I'm not letting you stay here. I don't know why you thought showing up unannounced would change anything." She rolled her eyes and crossed her arms. "You're being ridiculous. It's not like I'm asking for much. We'll only be here for a little while, just until I can find a new job and a place for the kids." At that point, I could feel the anger bubbling up. "You're not staying here," I said, louder this time. "I'm sorry you're in a tough spot, but you've never wanted anything to do with me. And now you expect me to just drop everything for you?" Her kids were starting to get restless, and I could tell this conversation wasn't going to go anywhere good. Brianna, of course, wasn't giving up that easily. She shifted her weight and said, "It's not just about me, Lexi. Think about the kids. They need somewhere stable. Don't you care about them?" Okay, let me pause for a second here. Of course I care about the kids. They didn't do anything wrong, and it's not their fault their mom put them in this situation. But that doesn't mean it's my responsibility to fix everything. I had no connection to them, thanks to Brianna making sure I was never part of their lives. So, while I felt for them, I wasn't about to let her guilt me into taking them in. "I care," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But you made it clear a long time ago that I wasn't part of their lives. You didn't want me near them. Now all of a sudden I'm supposed to play the hero?" She huffed and glared at me. "It's not about the past anymore, Lexi. You need to grow up. Things are different now. I'm asking you as a mother, not as your stepsister." I couldn't believe the nerve of her, as if her being a mother erased all the crap she put me through growing up. I took a deep breath, knowing this wasn't going to end well. "Brianna, I'm not doing this. You need to leave." Her face twisted into something like a mix of anger and desperation. "So that's it? You're just going to turn your back on me? On the kids? After everything we've been through, you're just going to let us suffer?" At that point, I was done. I was trying to stay calm for the sake of the kids, but her entitlement was too much. "You made your choice a long time ago," I said firmly. "You didn't want me in your life then, and I'm not letting you use me now." She glared at me, her eyes narrowed. "You're unbelievable. You really think you're better than me, don't you?" That hit a nerve. I wasn't trying to act like I was better than her. I just wasn't about to let her walk all over me. But before I could even respond, her oldest kid, who looked like she was around 10 or so, tugged on Brianna's arm and said, "Mom, can we go? I'm tired." Brianna glanced down at her, and for a second I thought maybe she'd give up and leave. But nope, she turned back to me and said, "You're making a huge mistake, Lexi. Don't think I'm going to forget this." And with that, she stormed off, her kids trailing behind her. I watched as they loaded back into their car, Brianna muttering under her breath the whole time. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or just angry. Probably a mix of both. As they drove off, I shut the door and leaned against it, trying to process what just happened. I mean, I knew Brianna was entitled, but showing up at my house with her kids and expecting me to just roll over like that? It blew my mind. I felt bad for her kids. They didn't deserve any of this. But I wasn't about to let Brianna manipulate me into giving up my home. After she left, I called my mom to let her know what happened. She wasn't surprised, but she did sound disappointed that I didn't help. I understand, Lexi, she said, but Brianna's in a really tough spot right now. Maybe there's another way you can help. But I'd already made up my mind. Mom, I'm not getting involved. I can't. She's never treated me like family, and I'm not about to let her drag me down into her mess. My mom sighed. I just wish things were different. Me too, I said, and I meant it. But some things never change, and Brianna was one of them. Update 2. After Brianna and her kids left, I thought maybe that was the end of it. Like, she'd finally understand that I wasn't going to give in and she'd move on to bothering someone else. But of course, that's not how it worked out. Honestly, I should have known better. It didn't take long before things escalated in a way I wasn't expecting. A few days after her dramatic visit, I got another call from my mom. Now, this wasn't unusual. She and I talked fairly often, but the second I answered, I could tell something was up. Her voice was tight, like she was stressed or trying not to yell, which immediately put me on edge. Lexi, I need to talk to you about what happened with Brianna, she said, jumping straight into it. I sighed. Mom, I already told you what happened. She showed up at my house and I told her she couldn't stay here. Yeah, well, she's been talking to your stepdad and me nonstop since then, saying how unfair you're being. She's claiming you're turning your back on family and she hesitated. And she's saying we should be cutting you off for not helping her. I was stunned for a second. Like, Brianna was really out here trying to turn my own mom and stepdad against me because I wouldn't let her take over my house? The audacity! I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Wait, she's telling you guys to cut me off? Pretty much, Mom replied. She's making it sound like you're heartless for not helping her and the kids when they need it. She's really got your stepdad all worked up. He's been talking about how we should be doing more to support her as a family. I couldn't believe it. Mom, you know that's ridiculous, right? She's trying to manipulate you because I won't give her what she wants. Mom sighed, and I could hear the exhaustion in her voice. I know, Lexi. I get it. But things are getting tense here. Your stepdad feels like we should be supporting her more, especially with the kids involved. And Brianna, well, you know how she is. She's making us feel like we're failing her as parents. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache coming on. This was exactly what I was afraid of. Brianna pulling everyone into her drama and making me the villain for not bending to her demands. Mom, listen, I get that she's in a bad spot, but that doesn't mean I'm responsible for fixing her problems. I've been more than clear about why I can't help her. I know, Mom said softly, but you need to understand that your stepdad is struggling with this. He doesn't like seeing his daughter in such a rough place, and he feels like we should be doing more to make sure the kids are okay. And there it was, the guilt trip. It wasn't even Mom doing it on purpose, but hearing her talk about the kids like that made me feel like I was the bad guy. But I wasn't. I knew that. Brianna was using her kids as pawns in her little game, and I wasn't about to let myself get played. Mom, I'm not going to let Brianna guilt me into anything. I understand that the kids are in a tough spot, but that's on her, not me. She's the one who's made her choices, and now she has to deal with the consequences. Mom was quiet for a moment, and I could tell she was trying to figure out what to say next. Finally, she spoke. Lexi, I wish things weren't like this. I hate seeing the family so divided. Me too, I said, my voice softer now. But this isn't on me, Mom. Brianna has been treating me like I don't exist for years, and now all of a sudden she wants my help? That's not how family works. There was another pause, and then she sighed. I know, you're right. But just be prepared, Lexi. Your stepdad is really upset, and I'm worried he's going to take Brianna's side in all of this. That hit me harder than I expected. I'd always had a decent relationship with my stepdad, and the thought of him turning on me because of Brianna's manipulations made me feel sick. But I couldn't back down now. I had to stand my ground no matter how messy things got. Thanks for the heads up, Mom, I said quietly, but I'm not going to change my mind. I know, she replied. Just be careful, okay? I don't want this to get any worse. After we hung up, I couldn't help but feel this knot in my stomach. It was like no matter what I did, Brianna was determined to drag me into her mess. And now she was turning my stepdad against me too? It was exhausting, and honestly, I wasn't sure how much more of this I could take. But of course, Brianna wasn't done. A few days later, I started getting calls from other family members, people I hadn't talked to in months. My aunt, my cousin, even some distant relatives on my stepdad's side. Every single one of them had the same story. Brianna had been going around telling them how I'd refused to help her when she was desperate and homeless, painting me as the villain in her little sob story. It was infuriating. I knew she was manipulative, but this was a new low, even for her. I spent half my time fielding calls from concerned relatives, all of them trying to guilt me into doing the right thing by helping her out. I couldn't believe how easily she'd managed to get them on her side, even though none of them knew the full story. At one point, my cousin, who I hadn't spoken to in over a year, called me up and started lecturing me about family values and how I was letting my pride get in the way of helping someone in need. I was so close to losing it, but I managed to keep my cool long enough to explain my side of the story. Look, I told her, you don't know the half of it. Brianna's been treating me like dirt since we were kids. Now she wants me to give up my home for her? That's not happening. My cousin tried to argue, saying that people change and that Brianna was just trying to survive, but I wasn't having it. She hasn't changed at all, I said, my voice firm. She's just using this situation to get what she wants. I'm not falling for it. By the time we hung up, I was exhausted. I couldn't believe how much energy Brianna was draining from me, even when she wasn't physically in my life. It was like she'd found a way to invade my space without even being there. As the days went on, the calls finally started to die down, but the tension with my mom and stepdad was still there. Every conversation felt like it was walking on eggshells, and I could tell they were struggling to balance their loyalty to me with their guilt over Brianna. It was a mess, and I hated that it had come to this. But no matter how much pressure they put on me, I wasn't going to give in. Brianna had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. And if that meant I had to be the bad guy in her story, so be it. Update 3. So, after all the chaos of Brianna trying to weasel her way into my life and my house, you'd think things might finally calm down, right? Wrong. Because of course, Brianna had one more trick up her sleeve. This time, though, it wasn't just phone calls or guilt trips from relatives. It was something way worse. It started with a knock on the door. Now, after everything that had happened, I was a little paranoid about people just showing up at my place unannounced, so I wasn't exactly thrilled to hear knocking. I checked the peephole, and there was a man standing there in a uniform. My heart sank because I immediately thought something bad had happened. I opened the door, and he handed me an envelope and said, "You've been served." I stared at the envelope, confused and a little freaked out. I hadn't done anything wrong, so what was this about? I opened it right there, and to my absolute shock, I was looking at some kind of legal paperwork. It took me a second to process it, but when I finally understood what I was reading, I couldn't believe it. Brianna was suing me. For what? To force me to let her and her kids stay in my house. I'm not kidding. She had actually gone and filed some kind of claim that I was denying her housing or some nonsense, trying to legally force me to give up my home for her and her kids. I could barely even comprehend it. I mean, who does that? She couldn't guilt me into it, so now she was trying to legally take my home? I felt this wave of anger and disbelief wash over me. I didn't even know you could do something like that. I called my mom immediately and told her what happened. She was just as shocked as I was. "That can't be real," she said. "There's no way she can do that." But it was real. I double-checked the paperwork, and sure enough, Brianna had actually gone to a lawyer to try and pull this off. I was in total disbelief. I called a lawyer myself to figure out what my options were, and thankfully, he reassured me that this whole thing was ridiculous, and there was no way it would hold up in court. Still, the fact that Brianna had even tried something like this was insane. The lawyer told me not to worry too much, but we'd still have to deal with it legally, so we started prepping. I couldn't believe it had come to this. I mean, it's one thing to have a toxic family member who tries to take advantage of you, but to actually sue your own stepsister because she won't give you her house? That's a whole new level of entitlement. A few weeks later, we had the court date set, and I was feeling pretty nervous. I knew I had the law on my side, but I also knew how manipulative Brianna could be. I was worried she'd try to spin the situation to make me look like the bad guy again, like she'd been doing with our family. But there was no turning back now. We had to go through with it. When the day finally came, I walked into that courtroom feeling a mix of anxiety and anger. Brianna was already there with her lawyer, and when I saw her, I swear she didn't even look worried. If anything, she looked smug, like she actually thought she was going to win. I sat down with my lawyer, and we started going over everything. The judge called us up, and Brianna's lawyer started making this whole case about how she was a struggling mother of 4, and I had refused to provide housing for her in her time of need. The way they talked, you'd think I was some kind of heartless monster who kicked her and her kids out onto the street. I couldn't believe the lengths she was going to make me look bad. She didn't mention, of course, how she'd been horrible to me for years, or how she'd tried to manipulate me into giving up my house. It was all about how she was a single mom, just trying to provide for her kids, and how I was the selfish stepsister standing in her way. When it was our turn, my lawyer laid everything out. He explained how Brianna had never wanted anything to do with me until she needed something, how she had shown up at my house unannounced, demanding that I move out so she could move in, and how she'd been trying to guilt me into helping her, even though we had no real relationship. The judge listened carefully, and I could see him nodding along, understanding where I was coming from. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. The judge turned to Brianna and asked her point blank, "Why do you believe you are entitled to your stepsister's home?" And that's when it all fell apart for her. She stuttered and tried to make it about the kids again, but the judge wasn't having it. He cut her off and basically told her that this was a ridiculous claim. He explained that I had no legal obligation to let her stay in my house, and that just because she was in a tough situation didn't mean she could take advantage of family. Hearing the judge say that out loud was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. Brianna looked like she'd been slapped in the face. Her smug attitude completely disappeared, and she just stood there, speechless. I could see the realization hit her. She wasn't going to get what she wanted this time. The judge dismissed the case, and that was it. I walked out of that courtroom with a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. Brianna didn't even look at me as we left. She just grabbed her stuff and stormed out with her lawyer. I wasn't sure what would happen after that, but I knew one thing. I was finally done with her. When I got home, I called my mom to tell her what happened. She was relieved, but also sad. I could tell she was still struggling with the whole situation, and I felt bad for her. But at the same time, I couldn't keep letting Brianna ruin my life. Enough was enough. Since then, Brianna hasn't tried to contact me. I haven't heard a word from her, and honestly, I'm okay with that. I've got my life back, and for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm in control again. So yeah, that's the story of how my stepsister tried to take my house and ended up losing everything. It's not exactly the happy ending I wanted, but at least now I know where I stand. And honestly, I'm just glad it's over.